Alright, so as we turn the corner on Roland Garros in 2 weeks, let's talk about clay season. Yes, I needed to throw that in there, even though I would say by my estimation that Rafa Nadal had one of his poorer clay court seasons this year, and what does that say when you come out of it with Barcelona and Rome titles? We'll get into that a bit later, but there's a lot we learned in clay season, and particularly this past week in Rome. Right from the release of the draw, it was shaping up to be a phenomenal event, and it delivered in flying colors. This was the best week, the best tournament I think we've had of this 2021 tennis season. It was just fireworks everywhere. It was terrific. I'm kind of disappointed that I missed out on the chance to make a couple of videos, and I did have some in the works because initially I was going to make one about how I expect this to be a monster clay season for Rafa Nadal. Prior to Monte Carlo, I was working on that, and it turned out to be a dud because immediately in Monte Carlo he played very poorly and lost to Andrei Rublev in the quarters. But the reason that I was expecting a monster clay court season at the beginning was just because there was a lot of uncertainty on the tour coming in as far as health. Dominic Thiem, he hasn't been himself. He's been kind of on and off since New York, really, last year when he won the US Open, and Djokovic has not been the same guy on clay since his elbow injury, I would say since 2016 French Open. And as far as everyone else, like Sasha Zverev was coming in with an elbow injury, just a lot of uncertainty, and because of that I was expecting a monster clay court season, the likes of 2017, 2018 out of Rafa, at least 2 Masters titles and like 4 out of the 5 major clay tournaments won. That obviously didn't happen, and I would have looked kind of foolish putting that video out given how this clay season has unfolded. But that Monte Carlo loss really was a wake-up call that was made me really reflective about the last couple years as far as Nadal's clay court seasons. I think that now I'm of the impression that I shouldn't expect monster clay court seasons from him anymore, where he takes out 4 of the 5 titles every year. I don't think that's feasible anymore as he nears 35 in less than a month. We've seen the evidence in the inability to bring it week in and week out as he gets older, pretty much since 2019, even on the clay. I suppose 2020 is kind of hard to judge, but he did play poorly in Rome in his loss to Diego. Obviously a lot of extraneous circumstances there, but still, nonetheless, he hasn't had a monster clay court season since 2018, and it's probably best to stop expecting them. But nonetheless, as far as how his results panned out, this was pretty reminiscent of 2019, where he looked off throughout pretty much and then rounded into form in Rome. But honestly, even in Rome this week, he was still a decent ways away from 2019 Rome form. He was still able to lock down that Barcelona title despite not being at his best, and that was huge to be able to do that against the guy who's been the most in form on clay and throughout the year with Stefanos Tsitsipas. He definitely took the scenic route this year, and yet we find ourselves at the same point on this Monday after the Rome final, where Rafa Nadal is still that guy, and he is a strong favorite heading into the French Open in 2 weeks. If we're just going off of form in clay season, I would say he's not as strong a favorite as he has been in the recent past. But the thing is, the confidence he will gain from this Rome title, this was as difficult a draw as you could draw up, save Riley Opelka in the semis, but he got through that and he wasn't at his best still. He certainly made massive improvements and he's closer to it than he has been all clay season. But as we saw in the final and throughout the week, there's still guys that can challenge him in that shape. Now, the thing is, with the confidence boost that he will gain from Rome, and even had he lost the final, he's going to be a different player when he steps on Chatrier in 2 weeks. That's the unfortunate thing for the field, that there is still a level that Nadal can go up, and if history is any indication, even in the recent past, when he steps onto Chatrier, he's going to be a different man. And he's certainly primed himself to do so again this year, closing the clay season in style in Rome. As for his opposition, let's talk about them now. I'd like to think that I never underestimate Novak Djokovic. I have a tremendous amount of respect for his abilities. That being said, I did not think I would be standing here saying he is the second favorite heading into Paris, especially with how his clay season started. It really looked like an even bigger regression from Djokovic on clay than we've seen in the past couple years post-elbow injury. That was until Rome, and in particular the last 2 days of Rome. I was totally ready to be validated on the first day of the Djokovic-Tsitsipas quarterfinal. It was a match I'd been looking forward to all week, ever since the draw had been released. It was Djokovic at his best clay tournament against the guy who has been the foreign player on clay this year in Stefanos Tsitsipas. I had picked Tsitsipas to win the match and was feeling very good about that pick prior to the rain delay on day one of that match. When Saturday came, though, Djokovic found his forehand again. It's really been the one thing that I think has held him back from truly contending at the French Open these last couple years when it comes to the heavyweights and competing against Nadal and Thiem, the likes of those guys. In the last 2 days of the tournament, with the 2 matches on Saturday against Tsitsipas and Sonego, as well as Rafa in the final, I think that this is the best Djokovic has played on clay since Roland Garros 2016. I would say it's the best he's also hit his forehand on clay since that tournament. And it really paid dividends in the latter stages of this tournament, as you saw him compete with Nadal on clay like he hasn't since they entered this 30s stage of their careers, going back to around 2017. It was just so impressive what he did over the last 2 days, and I really was wrestling with whether I would pick Thiem over him at the French Open this year, when Thiem's coming off a long break and has shown rust in a couple of matches since coming back. But with what he showed in the last 2 days of Rome, I have to bump him up to my second favorite. And for the first time in a long time, I was saying that nobody can do this to Rafa on clay but Novak Djokovic. I said that a lot when these two were in their primes, and historically speaking, nobody has pushed the king of clay like Novak has. And that had been missing over the last couple years. He hadn't really been able to touch Rafa on clay, but he made massive strides this week and was able to make inroads on a Nadal who probably played the best match of his clay season in the final, excluding probably the blip he had in the second set. So he's heading to Paris on a high as well. This result was tremendous for him, and again, forehand, it's the key for him on clay at this point. His serve has improved volumes, but it doesn't have the same impact on clay that it has on the other surfaces, and even though his backhand is regarded as his best shot, at least ground stroke, the forehand is, for most players, still the shot that really creates offense and allows for someone to dictate. And I think with Djokovic that's still true, and because post elbow injury his forehand hasn't been as dynamic as it was prior to it, I think that that's allowed for him to be overpowered by a lot of the top dogs on clay. And even Aslan Karatsev in Belgrade showed that during this clay season. But in those last 2 days in Rome, it made a reappearance, and, going up against Nadal on final Sunday on clay is always going to be an uphill battle. No shame in losing the way he did, and as a result, he goes into Paris on a high. So yeah, our top two favorites for Roland Garros are yet again the soon-to-be 35 and 34-year-olds, who, in their own words, basically, are still here up top. And that brings me to the next gen. This clay season, Stefanos Tsitsipas has been at the forefront of the next gen's charge to uproot the Nadal-Djokovic dominance as of late, and for much of this clay season, he was the form player on tour, period, not just next gen. He started out without dropping a set in Monte Carlo, albeit not having to face Nadal or Djokovic, who both went out early, but it was a very impressive display nonetheless to capture his first Masters crown, and he followed it into Barcelona without dropping a set again en route to the final. That final ended up being a roller coaster ride. It was thrilling, it was epic, and after 3.5 hours, Rafa Nadal saving championship point, and both guys had their fair share of chances in this match, but Rafa Nadal was able to overcome a championship point and drag himself over the finish line. Not a bad loss, but still winnable, honestly, because Nadal's form in Barcelona was nothing to write home about. Yeah, he got better and better compared to how he was at the beginning of the event and following Monte Carlo, but he was there for the taking for Stefanos, and yeah, we can let it slide. It's not a big deal losing to Nadal in a clay final. He's not the first. He certainly won't be the last. And even though he finally came back down to earth in Madrid, which was probably bound to happen, I still had no doubts putting him as my second favorite for Roland Garros all the way up until the second day of his quarterfinal against Novak Djokovic. Now, this wasn't really a meltdown on the level of like the Coric match at the US Open last year, but man, Stefanos had umpteen chances, chance after chance in this match. I get that the rain on the first day kind of hurt him as far as momentum, but even on the restart, he did well to create chances and keep those leads, honestly, through the second and third set. And you gotta know that Novak Djokovic is never gonna just sit down and go away quietly in a match of this magnitude. And right on cue, here he came. But Tsitsipas looked to have him buried in that third set. He had 3 or 4 chances, I believe, to extend his early break lead to a double break. He didn't get that done, and then he couldn't serve out Djokovic at 5-4, and there was only so many times you could get away with letting Novak stick around this long, and sure enough, Djokovic rode that momentum to victory and clinched the third set 7-5. Now, it's not the end of the world, and honestly, I'm very, very high on Tsitsipas on clay. I found his French Open last year to be very impressive. I think that had he not gotten hurt with the leg in that fifth set, he very well might have done to Novak what he did to Rafa down under in Australia this year. And he just gets A couple of his most glaring weaknesses, like his return of serve in particular, masked to a certain degree, and his peak level on the surface has just been very impressive, and something that I think translates to having clay as his best surface when he's at his best. And it certainly was supported early in this clay court season, even though he doesn't have the titles to the degree he does on hard courts to this point. I just feel like he's just most comfortable on the surface at this point. And as I said earlier, I was very confident from the beginning to say Steph would be the second favorite heading into the French Open this year. I even thought that he was going to be taking that moniker of Prince of Clay from Thiem very soon. But if you watched my video of the Next Gen's recap from 2020, the same concerns linger for me as far as Tsitsipas. It's mental for him. It's just kind of concerning to me how nervy he can get with a lead. You saw it in the first set of the Barcelona final. Nadal kind of stole that set, and you saw it again against Djokovic in Rome. He played from ahead in pretty much every set, and honestly, it just doesn't speak well to me about the rest of the tour when the guy who is most in form at the moment loses to a couple of 30-somethings who are far removed from their primes that were both really there for the taking for him. I realize that those 30-somethings are two of the three greatest players who ever lived, but I mean, it's just hard to see that happening in any other era. But that's a rant about the Next Gen for another day. It's just, Tsitsipas to me, the game, especially on clay right now, is there for him to contend at the business end of this tournament. I just worry about him getting over the hump in the biggest moments against the best of the best. I do think those are definitively your top three for Roland Garros in whatever order, but it is those three and then the rest. And that isn't where I would have expected to categorize Dominic Thiem with the rest, but here we are. Like Djokovic, Dominic Thiem did not win a title on clay this year, but unlike Novak, the signs don't seem to be nearly as promising as we head into Paris, and for him, he'll be playing Lyon, as will Tsitsipas. I forgot to mention that both of them have wildcards into that event, so that'll be a fun week of 250s with Federer returning in Geneva as well. But just getting on Thiem, he has been so hit or miss really ever since he won the US Open. I know he struggled with health as well as issues with motivation following that maiden Grand Slam victory, and that continued pretty much into clay season. He missed half of it pretty much, and then made his first appearance in a main draw since Doha in Madrid. I will grant you that his semi-final run was pretty good for a first tournament back. He kind of just ran out of steam against Zverev in the semis and put in a very poor showing there, but he struggled throughout Rome, very nearly lost his first match against Vucevic, and then played a marathon against Sonego, looked better there, as well as the end of the Vucevic match. But for the second year in a row, I just think that the circumstances aren't great for him coming into this event. I find it hard to believe that he is just going to snap back into his top form on clay after being away for a couple of months. From that standpoint, I think playing Lyon for him is a good call to get more matches under his belt. But nonetheless, I think it's going to be an uphill battle for Thiem to find his best stuff in time to make a deep run at the French Open again, as he did from 2016 to 2019. And I'm really just giving him the benefit of the doubt over the Madrid champion in Sasha, just because of his pedigree on this surface in the past. From a standpoint of form, though, I think that Zverev definitely has the edge on Thiem right now. He was having problems with his elbow early in this clay season, but really just rounded into form in Madrid, and that event is just tailor-made for him. He already had won there quite easily in 2018 as well, and yeah, he just feels so at home there with the quicker conditions due to the altitude, rewarding the big serving, but still making it really, really hard to hit through him in baseline rallies. And that week we really saw how good Sasha can be on clay. If we do go back to that 2018 clay court season, we got to see how formidable he is on clay. It's just that we've kind of forgotten because he hasn't shown it since that 2018 season, really. But he was able to raise that title in Madrid without really breaking a sweat, beating Rafa on the way, who he actually poses a decently tough matchup for, and he even played him quite well despite coming off a long match against Nishikori in Rome. And admittedly, I was scared that he was about to beat Rafa for the second time in 2 weeks on clay in that quarter, but now that that didn't happen, come on guys, we knew that Rafa wasn't about to lose twice in 2 weeks to anyone not named 2011 Novak Djokovic. Like, where's that demigod, and then where's Sasha Zverev? Let's be honest. All jokes aside, though, Sasha is in as good position heading into the French Open as he's been in a very long time. And I know everyone, myself included, loves to meme on his Grand Slam struggles, but honestly, as of late, he's been quite consistent in getting to at least quarterfinals pretty much everywhere, and it'll be interesting to see where he lands in the draw. He can definitely be dangerous to whoever it is, even Nadal and Djokovic. It's honestly a bit of a 4A, 4B situation for me with Thiem and Zverev at this point. But yeah, in talking about my top 5 favorites for the French Open, I basically just caught up on everything I missed, all of clay season, all of the winners of the major titles, and I am thoroughly looking forward to even these last couple tune-ups before the big dance in Paris in 2 weeks. That'll do it for me though. Please like, comment, and sub if you enjoyed the video. I'm hoping to start uploading more consistently after finishing school for this year. Feel free to leave your thoughts about the contenders at Roland Garros in the comment section below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all in the next one.